Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 140, A Door to a Universe of Stories. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're talking about the story told in the movie Stargate. How are you doing today, Mike?
I am doing wonderful today. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Excellent.
And what's new in your writing world?
New in writing world, just continuing from what we discussed last week, still going through notes and sort of restarting what I call pre-production on
Excellent.
the Tales of Zara book 3. Yeah, I have a whole process that I go through. We've talked about it before somewhat.
Yeah.
It's not just outlining. There's a lot more to it than that. So that's the whole process of before I actually start writing, I call pre-production. So I know I did some of this before, but getting back into it, I'm kind of rebooting my brain, just restarting it from scratch. So that's where I'm at. Early phases. Nothing too exciting yet. How about you?
Fantastic. I have finished Meridian.
Oh, fantastic
Yes.
on that.
I'm very excited about that. You know, it really helped that the snow that we had recently meant that my offspring's school was canceled. I had a whole week to just sit and work on that book.
Yeah.
It was so amazing.
Nice.
So now I have started, I guess what you would call pre-production on Umbra. I have kind of mapped out my big picture plot lines that I like to do. I am a discovery writer, so I don't like plotting too much because then I get bored. So I have to just know the big picture areas that I'm aiming for, but how I get there, I let that unfold as I'm writing. So I started to plot it, and I was very excited with what I've got going and what I've been doing and how I want things to go. And it was actually starting to feel too detailed. So I pulled back really fast, and I haven't looked at it for a while because I don't want to, it's a real conflict between the part of my brain that's like checklist oriented. It's like, yeah, let's make a checklist and you're going to do this and check this and then check this. But my creative brain doesn't like that. I have to be very careful that I'm in the right space to do the creative work, because otherwise it's just checklist work and it's less enjoyable. And I don't think it produces as good a story. And that being said, when I was working on finishing Meridian on days when I would learn that I didn't have to drive, I got so lost in crafting that story that I would realize it was dinner time and I was still in my pajamas. I started in the morning, I sat down, I'll do a little bit of this. And then the next thing I know, hours have gone by. So that is a great way for me to be creative. That's when I'm kind of in the zone. I'm really producing what I want. It works really well. And so I don't want to take that away by plotting too deeply.
Yeah, no. You have to do what works for you, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm very excited. We've talked about our process a little bit. As you call pre-production, which I love the way that you frame that. Like I said, I pick the high-level plot points. And then the other things that I like to do is I like to know where I'm going to start the story. What's the first chapter going to be about? What's the first scene going to be? And then I try to mirror that in my last chapter. That requires me making sure that I have those bookends in place. And then, of course, the opening chapter has to be interesting to catch people's attention. So, I need to think about how that's going to work as I'm thinking about how it's going to mirror that last chapter. That's what I'm cogitating on right now. I have not written anything for it. Actually, that's not true. I actually have written something for Umbra. I'm also deciding that for these books, because they are multi-layered stories with lots and lots of plot lines weaving together. I mean, this is a space opera, right? So it's got character arcs, and it's got political thriller stuff in there, and it's got adventure stuff in there, and it's got all these different threads that I'm weaving. I've decided it's probably a good idea to have a preface in each book just to remind people where they are in the story and what happened in the last book. Did do the preface, which is essentially summarizing what happened in the last book.
Yeah. Some people summarize like that. Some people don't, and it just continues right from the last book, assuming that you remember everything. I kind of do a little bit in between right now where I'll have the characters discuss some of what was going on before, and then maybe have some of the narrator in there as well, referencing, kind of broad strokes of what happened last time, kind of blended into the story. But maybe I should just do a preface in the future. I don't know. I'll think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's personal taste, and I understand. I fully understand that people may not read the preface, and that is totally okay. I have pieces in these novels that I understand people may not read. I have prefaces. I have epigraphs, which are essentially little paragraphs of information at the beginning of a chapter, like above the chapter, where the chapter begins. Just sort of information about the world or about a character. And I get that some people won't read that, and that's okay. This is, these are like, I see it as sort of layers for people to immerse themselves into or not. It's totally okay. One of my characters is collects interesting words. That's one of her hobbies. And so she uses all these 25-cent fantasy words, and I have definitions in the back of the book for people. Some people might like that. Some people may not think it's necessary, and that's totally cool. I just provide an opportunity for immersion or not at whatever level feels most comfortable. And it's all good.
I think that's great.
Some people feel very strongly about prologues and epilogues. I have a prologue for every book. I have 2 epilogues in Meridian.
It's like Brandon Sanderson. He had like 3 prologues for The Way of Kings or something like that.
Did he? I have to go back and look.
Something like that. I remember him talking about that.
Yeah, just one prologue. Yeah. I think prologue, again, it's another way to immerse people into different perspectives.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. And I have a lot of fun writing it, and they feel like they enhance the story to me, so I'm cool with it. What interesting stories have you found lately in books, movies, and television?
Oh, I was watching the 2nd season of Fallout.
Oh,
I know you had tried watching before.
I did, and I just couldn't.
It's obviously it's based off of a series of video games.
Yeah.
It's sort of a 1950s style post-apocalyptic story based on those games. Yeah, it's I don't know, I find it very interesting from a story perspective. It's very over the top, satirical, horrific, gruesome and dark often. Sometimes funny. Yeah, it's an interesting mix of things. I'm enjoying it.
Good.
Have you encountered anything super cool?
I have started watching Star Trek Starfleet Academy. I have finished watching the first episode, and it stars Holly Hunter, and she's a great actress. And as far as Star Trek pilots go, it's, I think, right in the middle of the pack. There are some really great moments. There's some moments that were kind of predictable. And I will say the measure of how it was for me is that I'm looking forward to the next episode. Well, I want to see what happens next.
Okay, that's good.
And I'm continuing to read The Sea of Green by Tristan Smith.
Nice.
So, and then I'm thinking about what to read after that. Maybe I'll reread something. Maybe I'll reread Hail Mary in anticipation of the movie. Or maybe that's a big mistake.
Yeah, it might be a mistake. Be directly comparing every little thing.
Are you ready to talk about Stargate?
Yeah, let's do that.
Today we're talking about the story told in the 1994 movie Stargate, and I'm going to read the overview that comes up on Google when you type in Stargate movie. In the modern day, Professor Daniel Jackson teams up with retired Army Colonel Jack O'Neill to unlock the code of an interstellar gateway to an ancient Egypt-like world. They arrive on a planet ruled by the despotic Ra, who holds the key to the Earth traveler's safe return. In order to escape from their intergalactic purgatory, Jackson and O'Neill must convince the planet's people that Ra must be overthrown. Did you enjoy this movie?
Yeah, I really like this movie. I saw it in the theater when it first came out. And yeah, I think it gave me that sense of wonder when I first watched it that sometimes it was hard to capture. I really liked how they blended, Egypt's history and mythology with this idea of aliens coming in. I mean, since then we've heard a lot about that kind of thing with ancient aliens, TV shows, and things like that. But this was fairly early on, maybe even before some of that stuff. So I thought that was a really cool idea. I love the idea of finding some future technology in an ancient archaeological dig. I just think that's really cool. And also something we mentioned before, there's this sort of idea of this whole other world going on that nobody knows about. Not like physical world in a sense, but like there's this other set of things that are happening, right, kind of in the background, that's sort of being kept secret. And this sort of opens that door into that type of thing. And I thought that's really cool. I like that kind of stuff. And then I like how there's this unveiling of the mystery. You get the opening scene of them doing the dig in the past, and what's that thing going on? And obviously, if you're watching the movie, you probably have some sense of where it's going, so you know what it is. But it's cool when they pull the gate up out of the desert, and you're like, oh, that's neat. So I like that. I like the how they reveal different aspects, and again, how we get to see what's going on in this world from an outsider's perspective, right? With Dr. Jackson going in and him being introduced to the concept of this technology that they had uncovered and having to figure it out, and we're there with him in that. It's such a useful technique that we've seen over and over again, and I think it really works in this case too. Versus, we're just there from the beginning and following along. They could easily have done that, but I think this worked better and let us have that sense of amazement throughout the opening act of the story. I thought that was cool. I thought from a story perspective, it made sense to have someone like Jack O'Neill go on this mission, right? Because they know it's a suicide mission. Obviously, the people probably know kind of his mindset of where he's at and also his background, and thought, okay, yeah, maybe we send this dude. He'll sign up for this, and he did. That kind of made sense. And another thing I noticed this time watching it through was when Catherine gives her amulet to Daniel Jackson. Obviously, that was something that was needed for the story, but I thought the way they did it was smart. It's like she said, oh, this is something that has brought me luck, and she's giving it to him so that he has luck on this mission. Like, that makes complete sense. So it's a good reason for him to have that amulet, which triggers the response of the people once he gets there. So I like that. Sort of the visual and the setup I really liked of them going through the gate for the first time. Like, that would be a crazy thing. So I'm glad they took a moment to have Jackson there, at least kind of waiting and looking and wondering at this portal. I thought they did that well. The whole sort of plan or backup plan, whichever way you look at it, of bringing the bomb there, the nuke, was smart and seemed realistic. It's like you're going to some other world. You don't know what's on the other side. Like, yeah, that makes sense. You might need to like shut this connection down if necessary. So I thought that made sense. And then to have the community that was there that they encountered harvesting material from the gate, which had this special property that they were using, that all made sense. I thought the idea of having the ship come down and land on the pyramid was cool. Completely ridiculous. Makes no sense. but it was cool to sort of blend, like, hey, what would they use this for potentially? Let's have the ship land on it. I don't know. It's dumb, but it was neat to see. And I thought it was kind of an interesting idea. And then the interplay with Jack, and obviously what happened with his son, and then the kid, I think Scar is his name, on this other world, where the kid goes to pick up the gun and Jack freaks out. I thought like that made sense. And they're touching back to this sort of dark thread that they had opened, with Jack's origin story, of this movie. So I like that. Then I thought it was cool having the Egyptian god Ra, God in quotes, coming out of the sarcophagus like a vampire when we first see him. I thought it was a cool idea, right? It's kind of like this
Because he is
parasitic.
like vampiring,
Yeah.
vampiring somebody else's body. Yep.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool setup and introduction to that character. I also like that there were language differences, right? So many times in sci-fi stories, you go to other worlds and people just speak English or very quickly come to that. And the show kind of, goes that direction, obviously, because it's, you can't have them learn a new language every time, every episode of a show. But for the movie, I thought it worked well. And we get to see Daniel Jackson's, his skill and his talents put to use. And I like that you feel bad for the, enslaved innocent people on the planet who were thrust into this situation and are kind of stuck in the situation. They're trying to help out these new strangers and then they get punished for it. So all that I thought was really cool. I like the science fiction aspects of it. I like the blending of the mythology, this sort of epic feel to it when they go and it's like this whole new place. Cool idea. And I like that Jack gets to a place of some peace at the end of the story. Overall, yeah, I loved this movie when it came out. I still really enjoyed watching it again. What do you think?
I think this is a fantastic movie. This has always been one of my favorites. And I am, of course, a big fan of the Stargate universe that came from this story.
Yeah.
And that kind of is a testament to how good the story is. It is so rich and full of interesting elements that it became the source material for a lot of television entertainment. And that's really cool. I think in particular, when we first meet both Daniel and Jack, the way that they present them to us is it's a great example of how to see the setup for the hero's need immediately.
Yep.
As well as what they think they need. And we get that so efficiently and so fast and so organically that you don't even know it's happening. It's just beautifully told. We see Daniel, he thinks his need is to be recognized for his theories about the pyramids in ancient Egypt. But then we learn very quickly what he really needs is a way to support himself. He needs shelter. He needs food. He needs purpose in the world. And the same way we see Jack, who has lost his child and he's in despair, and he thinks what he needs is to end his life. That's why he goes on a suicide mission. But what he really needs is a renewed sense of purpose as well. But the way they set it up is just so beautifully done. It's very fast, it's very organic, it's very clean, and we know exactly what they need. And I think that the very small way that that's done is still quite powerful. And I think that connects people to them right away and makes the story move forward and people want to stay in that story. And if you really take a step back and look at this movie, there's not much action in this movie, not till the very end.
Yeah.
As you pointed out, there was the need to translate. A lot of this movie takes place in another language.
Right.
I mean, if you step back and look at it, I don't think somebody probably has because people do amazing things now on the internet. But if you were to figure out at what percentage of this movie people are not speaking English, it's, I think, probably at least 50%. And yet, it's keeping you going. You're engaged. You want to know what happens next. That's a great story when you got people engaged and you're not blowing things up and you have to, figure out what translations are. I think that's a great story. One of the things I actually really love is Catherine, when she presents her proposal to Daniel in the car in the rain. The way they set that up, again, so quietly done, so neat, so efficient, right? She's escorted by the Air Force. So there's this indicia of truthfulness because she's there with these very official people. And she's very blunt with him. Do you want to prove your theories are true? Which is what he thinks he needs. Even though she says what you really need is you don't have a place to go to anymore and that everything you own is in those 2 bags, right? She recognizes what he actually needs, but she tells him, this is going to help you achieve what you think you need. And because she's sitting in a car with the Air Force, she has sort of an indication of truthfulness that he can't deny. If she just came up to him in the middle of that conference without the Air Force people around her, she would not have been as believable to him.
Right. Yeah.
It's brilliantly done. I also wanted to say how beautifully done the supporting characters are. One of the things that I noticed this time around was the character that plays Barbara, the woman that plays Barbara, and this character Barbara, who's one of the scientists that's there on this project. Little things. When he starts talking about at the big meeting with the military, and he starts talking about the 7 points that they need, and then they tell him mention the device, and he's like, what device? And the general's like, show him. Barbara reaches over and puts her hand on Catherine's arm. And it's this very subtle, small thing, but that shows her we did it. This is moving forward. And it's just, I thought it was amazing that even that character could have just sat there.
Yeah.
She didn't have to do anything. But it's that little piece that gives her depth and shows who she is and what her purpose is in the story. And again, it's just a small, efficient little thing that raises the whole story to something very real, very alive, and that you want to follow through on. I also really like how, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the theme, but as they framed the very beginning and they're opening the gate, you get a couple of these shots of all these military men standing in a window watching with very serious but otherwise non-expressive faces. And it's almost creepy. And you get this sense that at this moment, this is the military versus the scientists. The scientists are dynamic, they're excited, they are wanting, it's the thrill of learning new things and answering questions, and the military is standing there looking grim. And so you're starting to think this is going to be a scientist versus the military story, which it kind of goes in that direction once they arrive.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that, but that's not how the story goes. And it doesn't go into this story where if you watch it from that standpoint and kind of look at it with the way that they frame the very grim looking military standing up in that window, and you're thinking, okay, this is a story where the scientist is going to save the day and proves to the military that the scientists have value. But that's not actually what happens.
Yeah.
What happens is that these two people figure out how to work together and realize that their gifts enhance each other's, and they are together way better than they were separately. And I really like that about this story. This is about really valuing what each person brings to the table, even to the point of they recognize what the local people bring to the table and add that to the collaborative process to accomplish their goals. And so it kind of sets you up at the beginning to have an idea of this story is going to go one way, and then it subverts those expectations and it takes the story in a slightly different direction. And I really like that.
Yeah, I agree with all of that too.
Yeah.
I think, it's interesting. Jack he's very practical, obviously, but also not quick to react like his soldiers are. They're ready to beat Daniel up. And he pauses and he realizes the situation, like this isn't going to help anything. So obviously he's very experienced. He knows what's going on. He makes practical decisions, and he's pretty sharp. He's very aware of people. He calls Jackson's nonsense when Jackson says, "Oh, I can definitely get us back." Jack's like, "Yeah, I don't believe this guy, right?" And he was right. Daniel was just saying that to get on the mission. So yeah, it's an interesting character. I also love that you're talking about how they set up the characters very quickly at the beginning. Another thing I forgot to mention was you very early on, right? And when Daniel's there giving his speech and everyone leaves, you see this guy's an outcast, right? No one believes him. He's not accepted in his own community. And that gives him motivation to stay in this other world where he's accepted at the end, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point.
For him. Yeah, some very good writing techniques. But yeah, I agree with everything you said.
And I think that's a really good point about his being an outcast and then finding his family, because that is also part of what his need is that Catherine outlines. This is your family, and he says foster family, which means he doesn't have a family that he connects to. If he has to put in the qualifier foster, he's not that connected to them.
Right.
We love this movie, but is there anything that we might have changed as a writer?
There's some things, I guess, like setting it up, I would have probably done a little bit differently. one of the things, and this is like a small thing in the movie, but the alien talks about having chosen humans because their bodies are easy to heal. That just is dumb. That doesn't make any sense. Like, why are their bodies so much more complex that they can't be healed? I mean, it's just not believable, and wasn't even necessary to mention that. You could have just completely cut that out, or just mentioned that, he was a parasite that took over the bodies of other beings, like it was more like it was in the TV show, and that would have been
Yeah.
efficient and less silly of a reason. He came upon these people, his parasitic, took them over, and said, oh, "Okay, I can enslave these people because they're primitive." Like that would have been plenty enough description. The whole healing thing, they obviously did it because they wanted to show the healing device, but they could have had the healing device there without that explanation. So I wouldn't have put it that way. I probably would have spent a little bit more time with interactions with between Daniel and Jack O'Neill and the people on the other planet to just establish a little bit more of that bond between them. I think they did a pretty good job. I probably would have done a little bit more with that. So we have even more caring about them, when they're attacked. And then also the setup with Jack's son, obviously the horrible experience he had, and then the situation with Skara going to grab for his gun. It was a good callback to that thread that they had set up, but it didn't really pay off well enough for me, good enough for me. I would have had maybe the kid Skara save Jack specifically by shooting one of the bad guys. Maybe when Jack's, having a fist fight with one of the Egyptian type soldiers. I forget his name. One of the guys with a big head thing on it.
Yeah.
That would have let Jack fully internalize that not every such situation with his son or surrogate son in this case would end the same way. And it could have helped build a tighter bond between him and Skara. So that might be something I would have changed. Again, not super critical, is a smaller thing. The whole gate thing and the address thing, that was the one thing that really sticks with me in this movie that doesn't really make much sense. They randomly identified these first 6 symbols that they had to use somehow, but they couldn't randomly identify the 7th. It just doesn't make any sense. I like that they used astronomy and the constellations and all that for the mapping and selection of the destination. I thought that was cool. I'm definitely not an astronomer, but it seems like those constellations would change as you zip to different locations within the galaxy. So they wouldn't be the same on different planets, right? So, and also, how would a linguist know which constellations in the new location they're going to would be able to zero in on Earth? It's like you'd have to be a really, really good astronomer and have a good 3-dimensional sense of space of the galaxy to be able to do that. So he was the wrong guy for that. You would need someone else specifically to be able to do that. But in the context of the story they were going for, I see why they simplified it. And that's why they had to have it written down at the new location he went to, because otherwise Daniel Jackson wouldn't have known. So they were there. But the implication is when he got there and they had the address back to Earth, is that there's only 2 locations connected by the Stargate, which doesn't really make sense. Then why would there even be all these other constellations and glyphs on the gate? You could have just had a button to turn it on and off to connect these 2 planets. So I would have either simplified the gate system, if that's what they were going for, or have someone mention at the end that there must be other locations that this gate connects to. I probably would have done something like that, because it's sort of, even though it's sort of like it's an epic kind of feeling movie, in a sense it's still small, right? It's just these 2 planets, but the implication of the gate system is that there's thousands and thousands of planets that this thing must connect to. Maybe you have to hop from one place to another, but certainly if you're going to have this complicated addressing system, you're going to be able to go all over the place. They never really addressed that. It's just kind of implied. So I would have liked some specific mention of that at some point in the story. I have a feeling maybe they were going that way. I think I remember reading something from the director and writer that they had planned to do a trilogy or something, and then went on to other projects. So maybe that was,
Okay.
or
Yeah.
maybe that was sort of the impetus for starting the TV show. I don't know. I could be wrong on that, but it makes sense why the show exists, right? It's like, it's exactly that. It's like there's all these addresses on this gate. It's got to go to other places. So it really opens up that world so much more. As epic as the movie felt, it's at the same time kind of small in that sense. So I would have mentioned that somehow in the thing to set up something in the future, just as a sort of little teasing thing, even if he didn't make another movie out of it, just because
Yeah.
it's a cool idea. So anyway, I don't know. I'm rambling at this point. That's it. I stop here. Is there
And
anything?
I agree with you. There are some world building logical consistencies that have not been explained.
Yeah,
And I think it goes to show how strong a movie this is and how invested we are in what's happening and these characters that we're willing to overlook all these questions and just enjoy the
yeah,
movie.
yeah,
Because when you sit back and take a look at it, there's a lot of logical questions that need to be answered. One of the things that has always bothered me about, one young man went towards the light and then was captured. Why? Why, when everybody else is running away, would one person go forward? It would make more sense to me. And what I might do as a writer is to have like a group of young men going. Young men egg each other on, right?
mhm,
Especially when there's, things that are scary, and then have this one young man grabbed.
yeah.
I think that
Great.
then it seems like it's more consistent than just to have this one single person completely ignoring the stress and fear of everyone else in the community and just going towards that light. That didn't make sense to me. The other thing that did make sense to me, or one of the things that I think would have been worked a little bit better if we did it differently, is why lift up that ring in Egypt in 1928? There's absolutely no reason to lift it up. And as an archaeologist, would you really want to lift
Yeah,
a 1,000-year-old thing off out
potentially
of the
damage
ground?
it.
But one of the things that was really interesting was that then a worker said there's something buried underneath. That would be an impetus to lift the ring up. So I think if that had happened first, there's something buried underneath, then you can go ahead and lift it up. Then you find, the fossil remains of what we now are called Jaffa, but weren't called that in the movie. And they're little things. They are little things. They're just threads that I think I would want to close up in my storytelling just to make the story a little bit more satisfying. The biggest question I had was when we got to the mountain, what was never answered was how did they know that this thing was some kind of a connecting device? Who knew to stand it up and cook it up to electricity and do something with it? Because that's not the first thing you think of when you see an archaeological artifact is let's connect it and see what happens. So I think that just a little bit of dialogue to explain to us what made them decide it was actually something worth attaching electricity to and having computers monitor it. Did it have some kind of underlying electrical charge that they sensed? I mean, that could have been a single line that they could have explained to us what the reasons were for
Yeah,
doing this. Yeah.
yeah,
And in the series, as you know, they do retcon a lot of this stuff. They
right.
answer these questions, which is nice that they do that. But as if this was a single story by itself as a writer, I think I'd want to have those questions answered and have that woven in just a little bit so that it doesn't stand out as not making sense. Now, that being said, as I said before, we're so engrossed in this movie, it doesn't matter. So it's only when I take a step back and look at it that I like, okay, well, this doesn't make sense. The other thing I would have liked to have seen is when they blow up Ra's ship, I would have loved to have had some little tiny bit of dialogue about, sorrow for the host. There's
Yeah,
this kid who was essentially abducted and abused and used by this parasite. Just, a little bit of, grieving for that person who was killed. There's also no answer to the question about what about all of Ra's handy people? The kids that like dress him and stuff.
right.
Nothing said about them either. Now, the reason that I actually asked that question is not because I thought of it myself, but I also have read some of the novelizations of SG-1 stories. Those are fun reads. And so one of the books retconned that too and said that as part of Ra's downfall with these people rebelling, the kids rebelled too, and they all beamed down to the pyramid before the ship was destroyed, which
Okay.
I think is an interesting take, but that came from a novel. Those are little things that just sort of help weave the threads, finish those threads. But again, you when you're watching the movie, you don't even think about that because you're engaged and you are so interested in what's going to happen with these characters, and it makes it work. So again, small things that I might to do as a writer, not things that clearly needed to be done in order to make this a good story. Did you come up with any themes from Stargate?
We touched on a couple of things, like, finding family, finding your place, finding your purpose. I think that's definitely a theme going on. The character journeys that we go through. I think overall, there's also the concept of fighting for freedom, right? You must be willing to risk everything to secure freedom, or you have to be willing to stand up to power, even the power of supposed God. It goes back to it's better to die on your feet than live on your knees kind of thing.
Nice, yeah.
I feel like that's the overall thing that's going on with the character themes that we mentioned before. What did you come up with?
Yeah, I came up with that character's theme of just using everyone's strengths achieve success.
Yeah, I like that.
And as a writer, what do you take away from Stargate?
Yeah, I don't remember if we've talked about this before or not. If so, not too much, so I'm going to mention it now anyway. Just creativity in general. A lot of creativity is fusing different ideas into a new thing. In this case, sort of Egyptian history and mythology with alien invasion and enslavement. And this concept of like, how were these pyramids built? How did they do these things back then? Well, what if, and then they go off into this idea. So I thought that was really cool. I thought the movie was cool when it came out. I still enjoy it. So for me, it's a good reminder to blend different things in new ways. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway. A really great takeaway. And my takeaway is one that we've talked about before. Actually, I have two of them. One, they're both things that we've talked about before is that anchoring the story in character, it carries the story. You can carry the story far when you anchor the story in the character. And the other one, of course, is, my personal preference of closing the threads.
Thank you for joining us as we talked about the movie Stargate. Huge thanks to our Patreon supporters and all our listeners. If you'd like to support the show directly, our podcast Patreon is in the show notes. No pressure, though. Your support, noticed through every like and share, means the world to us.
The Stories Told podcast is on all major platforms. Please like, subscribe, or follow to help us reach more story lovers like you. For book, TV, or movie suggestions, subscribers can drop a note on our YouTube channel. Join us next time as we talk about the movie Shrek. Thanks so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's fun to revisit these movies. I like it. Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.